Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. And this regular meeting of the Sandpoint City Council is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street in Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Mayor Shelby Ronstadt presiding. Also present are Council President Kate McAllister, Councilors Deb Rule, Joel Aspiro, Jason Welker, and Justin Dick. Under the city's adopted code of ethics and civility, as the presiding officer, I'm to identify the law enforcement personnel in the room who will be serving as Sergeant at Arms for this evening's meeting. And this evening we have Police Chief Corey Kuhn. If everyone will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from council this evening?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have one, just an update for the council on the progress of the Tiny Woods Skills Park. 2 weeks ago, the Ponder Peddlers went into an MOU with the city to oversee the project management of that project. And since then, we have nearly completed the Skills Park. I encourage you to visit in the next few days, and we hope to have a grand opening later this month. We're waiting for the Gino crew to complete the new gravel pathway around the existing tennis courts, which would provide access to our Skills Park. And hopefully later this month, we'll be able to welcome the kids of Sandpoint to come enjoy what's going to be a really great addition to our recreational infrastructure in town. So thank you for supporting that project. It's going really well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, and also to the 45 volunteers who came out last Thursday night. It was our largest volunteer party in 4 years to come out to help with that project. It was really exciting.
Fantastic.
Great.
All right. Any announcements from staff?
Just a quick one, Mr. Mayor. Weather's changed and leaves are dropping, so leaf pickup is scheduled for next week. And then crews will come back around the following week. So residents need to have leaves out in the street for crews to pick up by Monday. So they're going to make it throughout the whole city next week during the week, and they don't come back throughout the week. But because leaves are still falling, we will come back the subsequent week and pick up leaves again. People might see crews out this week. We're going to start pickup today. Just getting through town in some of the areas where there's larger piles of leaves because they're really piling up in some areas. So that's why crews are out this week. And if you see leaves piled up, but yours did not get picked up this week, it's because the official start is next week, but they're kind of getting an early run this week.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the public forum portion of the meeting, which allows the public the opportunity to address the council and myself regarding items listed on the consent calendar or any item not listed on the regular agenda. If anyone in council chambers wishes to speak now during the public forum or during any other portion of the meeting, you must complete a sign-up form that's available on the front table by the front door. Hand it to any of the city staff at the back table there, please. If you are on Zoom and would like to speak during the public forum, please raise your hand at this time. And of course, you will need a working microphone. To accommodate those who wish to speak on general items during the public forum, as well as those who wish to speak on any specific business item on our regular agenda, a total of 20 minutes will be allotted for the public forum at the beginning of the meeting now. And if you'd like to speak and did not have the opportunity to do so in that time window, we'll provide an opportunity by reopening the public forum at the end of our regular agenda. I'll now recite the rules and procedure for public comment during the meeting. Council may not hear or take testimony during public forum on any planning and zoning matter that is before the city or is known to be a likely application. Such testimony is allowed only during properly noticed public hearing. Matters that have been previously heard and decided by the council may be determined to be inappropriate for public forum. Those in attendance shall not engage in disorderly or boisterous conduct, use threatening or abusive language, hold up or display any type of sign, speak out of turn, or clap or engage in any other similar act which disturbs the meeting. Comments shall not be personally derogatory, nor shall they be personally directed at any individual, organization, or business. Issues regarding the performance of city employees constitute matters that must be discussed only in executive session and are not appropriate during the public forum portion of the meeting. Public comment opportunities during meetings are for comments only. Do not direct any questions to myself, to council, or to staff, and please do not approach the dais. Also, please do not approach the clerk or other staff at the front tables in front of you. That could disrupt their ability to do their work. You may inquire of staff at the back table who can provide any assistance if needed. Unless otherwise provided, each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. When it is your turn to speak, please introduce yourself and state whether or not you reside in city limits. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak during the public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Pam Duquette.
Good evening, Pam Duquette. I am a city resident. I had two things I wanted to share. One was a kudos to one of your city staff. The gentleman who answers the phone, I think his name is Garrett, very pleasant and very helpful. I just thought it would be fun to share something positive. The other thing, you were going to announce a comp plan meeting on November 29th, I believe, at 5 to 7 here. I have had many people approach me and ask you please to offer other dates also. You may be planning on it, and other times and maybe other places, because they want to be involved, but they cannot make it one place, one night at that 2-hour time. And then on that same notion, I have gotten 2 messages from the city, which was wonderful, about leaf pickup through my email, and a lot of other people have too. That might be a way to better get public to engage when something is happening. Because I think public wants to be involved. They feel like they miss it. They don't get notified. They don't see it. They don't read, whatever reason. But if there are more opportunities, I think people would like to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duquette.
Janine Shepherd.
Hi, Janine Shepherd, Bonner County. I just wanted to come and pray the Lord's blessing over your meeting tonight. So if you'd like, I'd love it if you'd join me in prayer. Dear Lord, we come before you, grateful for the chance to pause and give you thanks. You are a good Father, and you bless us in so many ways. I lift each item on the agenda to you, Lord, asking as the mayor and councilors discuss them, that your spirit would move and help them to make wise decisions. Help your will to be known and help them to be obedient to you in every decision. We ask that you help us to love one another, those we agree with and those we don't. Help us to unite as a community and make Sandpoint all you want it to be. We know that we are called not only to love you, Lord, but also to love our neighbor. We also know that the world will see you when we love them well. Colossians 3:12-14 says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. We know in our own strength it is not possible for us to love each other well, but with you, all things are possible. Come, let your spirit rest upon the meeting, Lord, and let your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd.
One moment. Mr. Mayor, there are 2 attendees that wish to share on Zoom.
Okay.
Rebecca Holland.
Good evening, Rebecca Holland, Bonner County resident, long time. So last Friday, the shade trees, the beautiful shade trees that were planted with purpose, were destroyed at Traverse Park while the children were arriving for school. I saw a group of second graders that were very distraught, and their comment from one little girl was, "It's not your fault." They knew I was trying to do something about that, but it was the mayor's fault, she said. Well, I left it at that, but it's not just Shelby's fault, it's all of yours. Every one of you know that it's an ordinance to have advisory committees. Had there been a tree committee, a park and rec committee, a pedestrian and bicycle committee like we used to have, then this never would have happened. That's how you have public engagement. Also, I made every effort to collect names of park users to bring to you, but you turned your back on them. Those are parents. You turned your back on them. And it's on you. And I wonder why you just trudge ahead. We teach our children to be accountable, but you're not. You've got sitting on a bucket of money to take care of change orders and change things. Why spend a whole bunch of money on a donor wall when you could do the right thing? You've done a very poor job of informing the taxpayers too that this new playground would cost them $500,000. So many people think it's out of one big bucket of happy money from the Russells, but it's not, as you know. And it's a very poor design on a lot of scores. Again, never going to the public for any discussion. This is just coming out of your planners, and I give them an F on this design. It's poor in many, many ways. You know, there's just so much dishonesty that's been involved with this, from the geotech testings in the beginning to lying about trees dying, etc. I just say shame on all of you guys, and don't pretend like while you're running for office that you can make some big changes, because you had a chance. You know it. It's on you guys. The manipulations and things that have gone down there are pretty disheartening. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry it ended this way. But it's on you guys, and everybody knows it. And trying to divert into other things like Jason was
Helen,
doing.
your time is up.
Disingenuous. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we have one more that wishes to speak on Zoom. Tish Livton.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor. My name is Tish Litvin. I'm a city resident and have been for over 20 years. I just wanted to communicate to the Council tonight, to the Mayor, that the communities of tennis and the communities of pickleball are working together and have sat down at a table to discuss what the interior of the Russell Sports Complex should look like to benefit both sports. And we have reached agreement in what that design should look like. Stefan Nybank has been instrumental in doing research, in providing what the best layout of that design might look like in terms of court surfaces and playing surfaces for both sports, playing environment for both sports. And he has presented a document to both Jennifer and Maeve last week. And I just want it to be clear that both of those communities are working harmoniously, opposed to what you are different than what you might read in remarks made by members of our community. We are in agreement on a lot of the necessities for both sports to be playing at the Russell Complex. So I just wanted to be clear on that and to dispel any rumors that might be out there that we are at odds with one another, which we clearly are not. So thank you for your time tonight. And thank you for the Russell Sports Complex and its construction finally starting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Littman. Madam Clerk, is that it?
We have one more, one moment. Kristen, sorry, I can't see your last name.
Hi, Kristen Steichen, and I don't live in city limits, but I live in Bonner County. So I just wanted to bring something up. It was a theme last year that came up a number of times when you were just getting ready to vote and kind of presenting your last few minutes of logic before voting. And things that I heard time and time again was, we're going to trust the experts. So I just wanted to unpack that a little bit and take a look at the logic of that, okay? So if somebody says trust the experts, number one, that's a way of deferring your power and even perhaps your logic. When you say the word expert, it's kind of with a capital E, and that actually means they're a polymath, and nobody's a polymath at this point. So actually the city planners, who are professionals and definitely have a skill set, they were actually referred to as the experts before you made a vote about a project that impacted Sand Creek. And some of the experts were actually sitting in the audience, and at the most they got 3 minutes. They would have been a conglomeration of experts, for example. So the only reason I'm up here is just to point that out, is as you move forward through the rest of your term, think about the next time you say trust the experts before you vote, and see if you can approach it from a different logical manner. Okay, thank you kindly.
Thank you, Ms. Steichen.
Mr. Mayor, that is all the requests we have received to speak under the public forum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That will conclude our public forum this evening. We'll now proceed with the consent calendar. For the record, the total amount of bills is $1,283,763.53. For regular payables, does council have any questions, or are there any items council wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion that the consent calendar be approved.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Counselor McAllister,
Yes.
Counselor Sparrow,
Yes.
Counselor Welker,
Yes.
Counselor Dick,
Yes.
Counselor Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes. We will now move on to old business. Following the public hearing held and closed during council's October 18th, 2023 meeting regarding the West Point Place subdivision preliminary plat, council voted to postpone action until this evening to allow time for staff to fully evaluate the request and to phase final platting, and to provide additional time to take into consideration the public testimony heard and the issues discussed by council. As noted on the agenda, staff will recommend that council move to reopen the public hearing at its December 6th meeting in order to take testimony from the applicant representative and to offer opportunity for additional public testimony. I'll now yield the floor to City Planner Amy Tweet for additional information and answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilors. Just to clarify what happened at the last meeting and where we believe we need to go to move forward. Again, we noticed a public hearing for your October 18th meeting. And after the notice had been posted, the applicant made a request of staff unique to a single lot. So in discussion with the applicant, it was either we had to completely pull the item from the agenda or move forward with the hearing and just postpone action on the item. And so that's what staff did. We moved forward with the hearing because it had already been published. It had been sent to the neighbors. But we recommended not taking action at that time until we could explore if you move to final plat just on lot 4, are there utilities serving it, and are there any other things that need to be considered? The applicant unfortunately misunderstood that and believed that the staff recommendation was that you were going to not have the public hearing, and that's why he was not here. So it was my probably miscommunication to him, thinking that the item was being not acted on, so he didn't need to be here. And so at the public hearing, council members had questions of the applicant. And there were also questions regarding stormwater that weren't necessarily something we were going to be coming back with. But at that time, the public hearing was closed, so no further testimony from the applicant could be taken. So in order to allow for testimony of the applicant, and he is more than happy to address you and answer questions. It was just a misunderstanding whether there was going to be action or not. We'd have to reopen the public hearing. So that is staff's recommendation, just so that the applicant can be here to address the council and that we can more thoroughly answer questions that were raised at the first public hearing on stormwater, that the council reopen the public hearing for December 6th. And that would give us time to republish, renotice the hearing.
Thank you, Amy. Does council have any questions? Seems pretty clear. Okay, would council care to make a motion?
I can make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion that we reschedule the public hearing for the West Point Place preliminary plat for the December 6th council meeting and reopen the public forum at that time.
For a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Counselor Dick,
Yes.
Counselor Roll,
Yes.
Counselor McAllister,
Yes.
Counselor Spito,
Yes.
Counselor Welker.
Yes.
Motion passes. For the final item under old business, staff has an update and has suggested a date for the additional comprehensive plan workshop that has been requested by council. So again, Amy Tweeten is before us to give us any additional information and answer any questions staff may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Again, as a follow-up to the first meeting in October, where the public hearing was scheduled on the comprehensive plan, council had requested that an additional workshop be scheduled. And staff's understanding is that is a workshop where council members will be present. Staff will also be present. So the thought was based on, and again, this is just the ClearGov updated page on the comprehensive plan. Just to go through where we have been for, I guess, the past year or so. We did do the outreach on the visioning in the summer of 22. We did the housing and neighborhoods workshops. There were 2 workshops for that, one on-site, one off-site. Based on limited participation at those, we did a follow-up survey. The commission continued to draft the document throughout, mainly from the summer of 22 to the winter of 23. Then we had the first review of the full draft document at the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 28th. Based on additional changes, then they agreed to post the document online for a little over a month, and then also held a public workshop on, let's see, April 27th. Following the workshop and additional changes incorporated, there was a joint workshop between the commission and council to go through the plan, as the commission had been intimately involved with it and council less so, just to walk through where we had landed to date, and then more changes were made. Then after that, the Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on the revised draft. Based on the public hearing comments, additional changes were made. And then they took action to recommend to the council on August 15th. And the that is when the public hearing was scheduled for October 18th. And then coming out of that, there were additional recommended changes both from council and the public. And the request was to have an additional open house on the final draft. So coming forward with the date of November 29th, we would also do similar to before the last workshop we did was the Conveo site. So it's an online site that people can comment right in the document. We got a lot of comments that way when we did it the first time. Again, because the understanding was the intention was council wanted to be present during this workshop is why we put the 2-hour time limit on it. If council's direction is to do a longer workshop, we're happy to do that, or additional workshops. But following the workshop or workshops, that would then come back with the comments to an additional council meeting where our understanding is council wanted to just discuss the comments that they heard. And then based on that meeting, the public hearing would be scheduled, which would require a 15-day public hearing notice. So those were the next steps that, as I understood them, after the public hearing, but happy to hear if council thinks a longer workshop or additional workshops are necessary.
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I guess, could you tell us, I think we're all probably in need of more than just this workshop on the 29th. What would it potentially look like for dates if we could get some different times available, maybe 1 or 2 besides this workshop to open it up to the public? Where not necessarily every counselor is going to be there, or using the library, or getting some other time so we can get some more much needed input from the community.
Yeah, I don't know if the preference is to stick to Wednesdays because that's a council night and there's availability of council members. Again, because there was a request to have a lot of outreach, we don't want to do it too soon. We want to give the community enough time through, our standard ways of reaching out, going to service organizations, doing flyers. I don't think we're going to do door-to-door hangers, but we will do our best to get the word out. So we don't necessarily want to do it less than a month from now. So we would likely be into December with additional meetings.
Okay. I guess my other thought would be to do the November 29th meeting and see what type of input we get that and schedule like another week out from there to have another workshop. I don't know. I'd like to hear from the other counselors.
I agree.
Can
Can you repeat that, Jason? Sorry.
What's that?
Justin, can you repeat that?
If we could do let's move forward with the November 29th meeting. What are we looking at, 5 to 7? Is that right?
Right, or if you want more hours, we can do.
I'd rather do the 2 hours that night personally, and then come back 5 to 7 days later with another one for the community, and we can get some notes together based upon how that meeting goes.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I think December with holidays, I think it'd be difficult for the community, people leaving, family coming up. I don't think that'd be fair for that.
How about the first week of December?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually typically slow for a little slower for the businesses until about the 15th.
Right.
So I'm leaning towards the November 29th meeting, 5 to 7, and then a follow-up with that 5 to 7 days later.
With another
With
2 hour.
Yeah, with another 2-hour session or open house where the public can come in and out.
Amy, I'm interested in the hybrid model that you hinted at with regards to the online option, so that we have a month where there's a portal at which, right now, I was on your page today and I downloaded the PDF. It's probably on my computer about 9 times now. It's probably why my computer's running so slow. But it doesn't seem all that interactive right now. Maybe I'm missing the place where the community can comment on the current draft. So I would encourage us to get a an online option for commenting, and then we promote that as well as we have promoted leaf pickup in the last couple of weeks, because I have heard a lot of people say that they received communication about that, and really try to solicit feedback through the website over the next month. My desire for the 29th is kind of a hybrid town hall workshop type thing. I really for years I've really loved the town hall type things where we're not up here, but we're out there. There's tables, there's display boards. Maybe each of us takes one chapter and we bring the planning and zoning commissioners in as well. I want to respect the years that planning and zoning has put into this, and I think they need to be a part of this process. So I would love for planning and zoning to be explicitly invited to the 29th workshop as well. And that's just more ears listening to the community on that night. So I would urge us to look at, chapter by chapter. We go around this room and we have the 12 or 13 chapters, maybe not every chapter, because some of them have been, recently updated, like the airport chapter. But the housing and neighborhoods workshop from late last year was like that. And it was really excellent. We don't need to repeat that exact workshop, but to have that for more than just one chapter, with more than just one council member attending as well would be really great. So including the planning and zoning commissioners, display board type thing where we're out there, maybe each of us stands for an hour at each display board, and then or 30 minutes we rotate or something. So what I'm emphasizing is quality over quantity at this point. If we use the technology that we have with our online commenting capabilities, and then we bring in all the planning and zoning commissioners, all the city councilors for a public town hall style workshop where we're out there talking to people who choose to attend. And then we follow that up pretty quickly with, possibly another workshop with planning and zoning and city council, kind of like we did a few months ago, just to go over those final comments that we received. I do respect that this is a final draft. This has been 4 years in the making. This is not the first public outreach we've done, but as we've learned recently, when the public's attention is focused on something, we really need to harness that and take advantage of that. So I'd encourage us to look at how to maximize the quality of engagement we have over the next month, rather than perhaps dragging this out through the holidays and delaying adoption further. We know this comp plan is 3 years overdue for update, but we do, as we saw in the August planning and zoning meeting, by the way, this is something I want everybody here to understand. 6 people showed up with the suggestion that we adopt language about heritage trees. That was 6 community members who came to that planning and zoning meeting. We had nothing about heritage trees explicitly in our comp plan. We do now because 6 citizens came, and that was an important priority for them. Planning and Zoning Commission listened. They amended the draft that we had in August, and that's the draft that we were given in October. So it's not too late to make amendments and changes to this comp plan, but it does require the community showing up and us listening. So quality is what I'm looking for, engagement online over the next month as much as we can, awareness, pushing it out via all the channels, and then as many commissioners and council members attending on November 29th would be my preference.
And Councillor Walker, I would agree with you wholeheartedly in terms of the quality, but I do think a second opportunity to be able to come in for those people who can't make it. We know that Wednesday nights are not the easiest for everybody to make it, but I would like an additional opportunity after the 29th to sit down with the community and be able to do it one more time. This document's too important for our community moving forward. I want to make sure. I
totally agree. That's
and we've
fine.
got enough. We've got enough eager people that want to attend and want to start being committed to being involved in this process.
Any recommendation on a night other than Wednesday?
Thursday.
Thursday?
Well,
Thursday.
we'd follow it up the next day. We'd follow up. I'd be fine with that as well.
No,
too.
not the next
Not
day,
the
the
next
The
next
next
week.
day or the next week.
the
yeah.
following week on a Thursday as opposed to a Wednesday.
Yep, I would just get it done within the 7 days from the 29th. While everything is still fresh and we've heard from the community on the 29th, and as Councillor Walker said, bring in planning and zoning as well. And I do like the format of everybody standing with a chapter, at least for a half an hour, to listen to the differences that we get for each chapter as we move forward.
Sure. And I know the interactive online one, the comments were really very helpful.
Mhm.
I really appreciated reading all that and all the comments. And so I think that's a great idea as well.
So my suggestion would be if we're not past the timeline, that we could have something go out in the utility bills that would explain how you can comment online and when the meetings are be. And if we decide on a date for the second meeting, then all that
information is in the utility bills. And because I've been asked by so many members of the public and had the suggestion made to me, I wouldn't be opposed to the door hangers. And I know that's complicated, but I'm willing to volunteer some time and hang some myself.
As will I.
Yeah.
Great discussion, council. Amy, does that give you the direction you're seeking?
Yep.
Excellent.
So my next suggestion, if we were gonna do the 7 days later, would be planning commission already does Tuesdays. So is there any one of you who has a preference for Tuesday versus Thursday if we're trying to give Amy really strong direction on when we want that?
Well, and you have a council meeting, I believe, on December 6th,
Could we do
which would
December
be that
5th?
following week.
Yeah, do the 5th or
Tuesday the
the
5th.
following day.
Oh, okay. So it's either gonna be the day before or the day after. Okay. So Thursday then? is what-
I
Works.
think Thursday is good.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this issue? Please fill out a comment form and hand it to the clerk.
One moment. Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one member that wishes to speak, Jeremy Grimm.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jeremy Grimm. Just want to encourage you to take your time in this process. You may have ago that in 2009, when the City Council adopted the comp plan, they made 22 or 23 special meetings. They read this word by word. They debated, discussed, came to consensus on their disagreements, and ultimately, the beautiful thing about that process is that you reach consensus. And once you have consensus, you effectively have clarity on your goals and policies, and everything falls into line. So I would just encourage you not to rush through this process. Take your time. Don't be afraid to hold extra workshops and special meetings. And then in addition to that, there was a lot of comment about, and language is important here, workshops versus open house. I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but Amy mentioned that you had workshops at the library. Those were open houses. And I'll tell you, as a professional planner, one of the best ways to sincerely take public comment, but not really have the ability to grasp it, is to hold an open house, because people walk by with their little sticky and they put their comments on. And yes, technically you've heard their positions and their concerns, but it's not a workshop. A workshop or a charrette is when you get people sitting at tables, really struggling, grappling, working through the hard parts of this and the conflict and the where, someone wants one thing, someone wants another. So I would encourage you to, try your best. It sounds like the interest is there to get sincere public engagement, and don't rush this. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm.
Kyle Schreiber.
Hey, Kyle Schreiber, Sandpoint resident. I liked all the discussion you guys were just having. One piece of input is maybe try and do it at the weekend. I know that means it wouldn't be here, but maybe at the library, midday, like a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon, where working folk might have a more of an opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber.
Mr. Mayor, there's all that wish to speak.
Okay, we will not be taking action on that item. Following council's February 15th, 2023 approval of a grant application under resolution 23-013, grant funding was awarded to the city to be used by the police department for a focus on impaired, distractive, and aggressive driving and seatbelts. Does council have any questions on this item?
Actually, I had some comments.
Okay.
If Corey might come up. questions, maybe comments? Let me pull. So, when I was reading through the beginning of the document, it says the grant is allowable for impaired driving, aggressive driving, distracted driving, occupant protection, seatbelt, bicycle, pedestrian, motorcycle safety, and youthful drivers. But then when I read down further into the document and the dates that we were going to do things, we didn't really reflect any bicycle, pedestrian, motorcycle, or youth driver safety. And the reason that that stuck out to me is there was an editorial in the paper, but also someone who spoke to me about this issue before they put a letter to the editor in the paper about young electric bicycle drivers and their lack of helmets and lack of safety awareness. And they are not quite of driving age yet. And he had great concern because he works within the school system about these individuals either seriously injuring themselves or worse, and also causing other accidents, and asked of me what the possibilities were for what we could do. And I said, you know, that gets kind of complicated, state laws. We don't have a motorcycle helmet law, different things like that. But I do remember as a child when mopeds were big, dating myself, that the state I lived in did start to make a licensing process really important, that you had to be of a certain age to do that. So I know I didn't talk to you about this and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but can you maybe have some input for everyone?
I'm not sure exactly if you're looking for an educational comment. We do our bike rodeos, we do education, we do helmets, we've handed out helmets, we've taught kids to ride bikes, we talk safety with those kids. That's not part of the grant, but which is absolutely correct. So that wasn't part of the grant. Those are other things that we've done. There are some requirements when it comes to like some e-bikes, scooters, those type of things where they are required to have licenses. Helmets, I don't believe are part of those. But the educational piece is completely different from the grant. So we partner with the fire department on some of our bike rodeos that include all those things. And those are absolutely things that we can look at doing more of as the summer comes back around.
Okay, because in this, it said that you could use these monies for bicycle, pedestrian, and motorcycle safety. So what is the intent of that in here then?
But we don't have it. If you read that, there is none, right? So if you look at the grant that we asked for, it deals with all the other stuff. So if you look at it, there wasn't like the dates that we picked and the
Can you
titles that we
pull
picked.
up that piece so we can see it on here?
So Halloween.
Well, I know the dates that you mentioned, what you were going to do.
It doesn't cover bicyclists. It doesn't cover those. Those are things that we could have selected, but we didn't.
Okay, that was
That
my
makes
question, because in the reading it said you could, but those were
Right.
not selected.
Yes.
Because we do these other rodeos and such.
We do other events.
Okay, all right. That answers it makes sense,
Okay.
but maybe we can have some further discussions just about how we can manage some of the comments that were made from this individual and
Absolutely.
moving
Yeah.
forward. Because I think we have looked at a lot of bicycle safety and I participated in the rodeos, but now the world is changing and I guess we just need to make sure we're keeping up.
No, absolutely. There's an absolute concern. If you've ever stood outside of the festival, and I won't even blame the kids, I'll go right to the adults.
Yes.
If you stood outside the festival when it lets out and the amount of adults that we have that are on e-bikes and the speeds that they can get up to, some of them go up to 25 miles an hour and their riding behavior. There's absolutely a valid concern for a huge education piece on that.
Okay, great. Hopefully we'll see that in the future and we can have some more conversations. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No,
But
that's okay. I don't mind.
Don't worry, Dad. My daughter told me that we're gonna have flying bicycles here soon, so.
Excellent.
Awesome. Can't wait. The Jetsons.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this matter? Ma'am, You have to fill out a comment form, but I tell you what, you can step to the podium and you can have 3 minutes at the podium. If you just please fill out a comment form afterwards and hand it to the staff at the back table, we'd appreciate that. But you do have to approach the mic there, please. Thank you.
To what's just being said, and
Ma'am, for the record, could you state your name, please, and whether or not you reside in the city?
I do reside in the city. My name is Marty Kellogg.
Thank you.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay. I have been just on Boyer and Division a couple of times when the little motorcycles have just kind of peeled out in front. So they don't go very fast and there was no accident, but I just kind of wanted to support the thought that it is an issue. You know, for some reason, I just happened to be looking the other way and this little buzzy thing came out in front of me. It could have been dangerous. So I just kind of wanted to support that conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, that's all who wish to speak.
Okay. Would council care to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
That's, and what is the motion? How about this? I would entertain a motion to approve the,
Guess I need to read the rest of it.
to improve the ITD OHS grant for Police Department Selective Traffic Enforcement Program. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Counselor Dick,
Yes.
Counselor Rule,
Yes.
Counselor McAllister,
Yes.
Counselor Spido,
Yes.
Counselor Welker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next, under new business is a request for emergency declaration and expenditures for a pipe repair at the wastewater treatment plant. Does council have any questions on this item? Pretty straightforward. Okay, is it Madam Clerk, Madam Assistant Clerk? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this matter?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you kindly. I would entertain a motion to approve the request for emergency declaration and expenditures for a pipe repair at the wastewater treatment plant.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Counselor McAllister,
Yes.
Counselor Rule,
Yes.
Counselor Spido,
Yes.
Counselor Welker,
Yes.
Counselor Dick.
Yes.
Motion passes. The final item on the agenda this evening is a proposed ordinance that would grant Avista Utilities a non-exclusive gas and electric franchise in Sandpoint. For Idaho Code, council will consider first reading of the ordinance this evening and approval of the summary, which will be published in the newspaper. Once 30 days has passed and the summary has been published, council can then consider final approval of the ordinance. If the introduction of the ordinance is approved this evening, it is anticipated that this will be back on the agenda for final consideration on December 6th. I'll now yield the floor to City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evening, council. The city of Sandpoint currently has a franchise agreement with Avista Corporation. It's a 25-year agreement that is now expiring. And what is before you tonight is a new franchise agreement. And I want to go through specifically tonight a couple of the areas where we've made changes to the franchise agreement that are a bit different than what we've had in previous years, primarily clarifications. The first, under section 2.7 franchise taxes, fees and costs, we have modified the agreement to have more specificity relative to fees being as determined by Idaho Code section 5032.9A and the associated fees which are provided under Idaho Code, and specifying when franchise fees are due and payable to the city. Previously, the language that we had in our current franchise agreement just stated the city reserved the right to designate the time and manner of payment of such fees or costs. So there wasn't specificity as to when fees were due to the city, when we should expect those, or if they weren't paid timely, what would be an associated penalty with those not being remitted timely. we are typically receiving fees on a quarterly basis, and timeliness has not been an issue, but clarity in these agreements is better for both parties. For reference for the council, in franchise fees and how much is received each year from Avista, last year our franchise fees amounted to $130,000. And to be clear, what franchise fees are for, it is for use of the right of way, so streets, right of way along the streets, and impacts associated with that. So what happens with franchise fees that are received by the city is those dollars then are spent on streets and right of way infrastructure maintenance and improvements that are needed. So that's what happens with franchise fees. Relative to permits, at the request of our city engineering group, this is a new section 2.8 on permits that specifies that there are times when Avista does need to obtain permits through the city. As provided under Idaho code, there is not a cost associated for those permits. The franchise fees covers associated costs. And when we do require permits of franchisees is in cases where they are impacting traffic flow on the right of way. And so there needs to be a traffic control plan. And the reason that we are requiring for reviews on those is we can have cases where Avista may have a project they want to do, and like we saw this summer, ITD has a project and we have our own projects. So this gets us an ability to review what are going to be impacts on pedestrian and traffic right of ways, and perhaps not permitting all of those activities simultaneously. That actually happened this summer. Avista had a project along Boyer, and the airport had their project along Boyer, and simultaneously ITD had their project on Fifth Avenue. So Avista's proposed project was further to the south than where the airport's project was, and we required some timing coordination so we weren't further impacting traffic, north-south traffic, with all three of those projects occurring simultaneously. Next edit that we made to this is under section 3.4, vegetation management, trimming, removal of trees, and vegetation encroachment. Under our current franchise agreement with Avista, there is no reference to our urban forestry code or any requirement of coordination with the city urban forester. We were working with Avista closely this summer and brought up those issues, both as they were looking at significant vegetation management program this year, and we were in the process of negotiating this franchise agreement. So we have added language to section 3.4 that references our municipal code title 7, chapter 15 pertaining to urban forestry, and also including a requirement that when Avista is performing vegetation management, that the urban forester be notified and that be coordinated. Particularly where that comes into play is sometimes that vegetation management requires removal of a tree that is under the power lines and not conducive because of the type of the tree and the growth to being under the power lines from a safety standpoint. And under our urban forestry code, if you are removing trees that are in the right of way, our code requires that you replace those trees with an appropriate tree at an appropriate location. So this triggers that coordination with the urban forester and notification if there is removal of any trees. And as we did this summer, there were a couple cases where there were tree removals and we required replacement of those trees at an appropriate location. So this ensures that that type of coordination occurs and there is appropriate compliance with our current urban forestry code.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
If I may. So I guess I was looking for maybe a little bit stronger language there, that is something that it would trigger code, or that this has been successful. Is that what you've just stated as far as when the trees were removed by Avista, then because the code was triggered, they did put in new trees?
Yes, they did
So
this
that
summer.
particular language does not have to go in here because it is triggering a code.
Yes, because it is in our code. So by coordinating with the urban forester and complying with municipal code, Title 7, Chapter 15, which
Okay,
is our
okay,
urban
so
forest,
that's how that
in there.
triggers. Okay,
Yeah.
it spells it out in code, which to me is a little more difficult because I don't memorize all our codes, unfortunately.
We specifically wanted reference to our city code because in the prior version under our current franchise agreement, there is no reference to code at all.
Okay, that's answering the question I
yeah.
had. Then in the prior one, there wasn't reference to that code. So now it's actually in there as the code and it's triggering
Yeah,
the
what
code.
you are seeing as yellow highlight here is actually new language that has been added to this franchise agreement that didn't exist in the current franchise agreement.
Okay, then my other question has to do with that same topic. So inappropriate pruning of trees, is there any recourse for that? Or is that going to be done better because they are required to work with the urban forester? So it's to not damage trees so much that then they fail and our canopy is ruined. So how do we manage that?
So by coordinating with the urban forester, as happened this summer, we had a list of all of the locations where they were doing work. Our supporting arborists came out and reviewed and also coordinated with Avista on their work. They are hiring certified arborists to perform their work. But there was coordination with the city on that in advance of it occurring, where in past years, frequently, they would come through and our franchise agreement provided for this. They would do trimming and removal of trees as they identified as necessary, but there was no trigger for coordination with the city on that.
Because we have ended up with some ugly punch bowls out there
Yeah.
that are inappropriate and the trees seem to be suffering and dying. So, okay, it sounds like we're taking care of that in this agreement because this is the next 25 years. So
yeah, the challenge with this a bit is we're trying to get language in here and ensure protection of our urban forest. Avista also has requirements under federal and state law about safety of utility lines and ensuring that vegetation is managed around utility lines. So they have requirements on them, but we are trying to get that coordination in here so that we're able to the extent possible affect compliance with our urban forestry code.
understood. Thank you.
Finally, our last area that I want to highlight is relative to conversion of electric distribution facilities and talk a little bit about what we have been doing in coordination with Avista. This language is in our current franchise agreement. It is not in many other jurisdictions' franchise agreement, but we have had a long desire in the city to underground overhead utilities when possible. We have successfully worked with Avista over the last 6 years in 5 conversion projects of overhead to underground. And we have some additional projects that have been identified. The last overhead to underground conversion that was completed was high voltage power lines, which typically they're not agreeable to converting underground. And we were able to successfully negotiate that along Sand Creek as we're trying to open up that view corridor along there. And so phase 1 of that occurred. And so the overhead lines were undergrounded from the bank, formerly Beaton Basalt, all the way up to the Panada. And then the second phase of that project was going from the Panada to Cedar Street Bridge. So that has not been accomplished yet. But that is the next conversion that's been identified for overhead to underground. Following that one, the next priority would be along the division corridor. And that's identified as one of the improvements needed relative to those corridor safety improvements as identified in our multimodal transportation plan. Undergrounding overhead utilities is the negotiation that occurs between Avista and the city on that. There is an associated cost. And we have been successfully able in the other projects that we've gotten done over the last 6 years to have some cost sharing because there was some benefit to Avista and its broader ratepayers, and there was benefit to the city with our desires and goals. So we paid a portion of that cost. We are not able to require that Avista convert from overhead to underground throughout the city, or to demand that that occurs in different areas without us paying the cost associated with it. And because otherwise the Avista cost is borne by ratepayers all across the state. So they've got to go through their rate reviews and justify any of the capital projects that they're doing and how that benefits the broader ratepayers. So overhead to underground conversions are not something that we can put on Avista. One of the challenges that we run into also with an overhead to an underground conversion is there's a cost to all of the property owners that are along that area that we're doing a conversion because their electrical service is typically set up for overhead electrical service. So most residential homes where it's coming in overhead, you'll see a mast on the roof, and that's where your electrical service is coming in. When it goes from overhead to underground, it requires a service change at those particular locations. The cost of a service change right now is running about $20,000. So that becomes a point of discussion anytime we're looking at an overhead underground conversion, because there is a cost to the associated property owner by making those conversions. Most of ours have been in the downtown core, and there were things that were already happening because of projects that we had or opportunities that had occurred where that cost did not get passed on to property owners, but particularly when we get residential areas, there's a cost to property owners. So that's one of the tricky elements with overhead, underhead conversions is there's cost to Avista's, the ratepayers as a whole. There's a cost to the city with paying our portion, and there's a cost to residents or property owners over and above both of those. There is grant funding that has been made available at the federal level through Department of Homeland Security for some overhead to underground conversions in urban wildland interfaces. We've been in conversations with Avista about that, particularly as we start looking at the division core, because that overhead to underground conversion is going to be in the millions of dollars. And so is that an opportunity for them? And it would be through Avista to secure some of those Homeland Security dollars, and those dollars are allocated specifically for wildfire prevention. So we have had some conversations about that. They are aware that that is a desire along the division corridor, but that is why you're not seeing language in here that is more specific with requirements, dates to perform by. Is these are really negotiated issues that involve both Avista, the city, as well as property owners along the area that we're looking at doing a conversion. Additionally, on our overhead lines, we have had some challenges in areas of town where Avista has actually undergrounded utility lines, and then they've got cable or fiber companies that are running on the overhead lines that did not get underground. And so we have and you've seen them, not just here, but this is an issue all over the place where they cut off the pole, the highest point of the pole where the electric utility lines were running. But now we've got a partial pole where cable or fiber is running along those lines. And Avista's been working really hard at cleaning up some of these agreements with the users on their lines to force them to get underground. But those agreements have not historically been in place. So again, that is something that they are working through. In fact, earlier this year, there was a moratorium that was put down against one of the fiber providers that was building out throughout the state because they were attaching to poles without actually getting approval from Avista in advance. So this is, we have a very good close working relationship with Avista. And we have been very successful in Sandpoint in getting some of these conversions, which have not occurred in other communities. So other than that, legal has reviewed the ordinance. Most of the language is standard. It's standard with what's with other communities across the state, but there were these several areas where we were able to negotiate some tighter language and clarity around what the expectations were.
Thank you.
I just have a,
Go ahead.
I just have a comment in that, we just finished remodeling our house and our contractor was thinking about undergrounding our utilities and it was upwards of $10,000. And so we decided not to do that. And also my previous career was at a corporation that dealt with utilities, and Avista, the power company, owns every bit of that pole, and anybody who wants to put a line on that, that's going to cost them a lot of money, and they do have to get permission.
My comment would be, would it be, because of the nature of what we have seen in several other communities with wildfires over the past several years, be worth it to have language in there that encourages Avista to look for that federal funding when it comes to wildland urban interface, because we are looking at a longer projection of over the next 25 years. So, I mean, I know we're having discussions and we're all friendly at the table currently, but would it be appropriate to put some encouraging language when possible, looking for this type of grant money?
I would say that they're being sued enough. Some of the other, like the California power companies are, that's some pretty heinous lawsuits that are going on. I'm sure that they are looking at those things so that they won't get sued, but.
If they're, I'm not saying that when grant funds are available, so it's not a cost to the city is what I'm saying in certain areas. And then I had another comment since I'm still on that piece where back up in the section 4.3, expansion of Avista utility, expansion of facilities. That was a little bit confusing to me. Is there really anywhere for them to expand in tiny little Sandpoint? And if so, could we require expansion to be underground since it's new to begin with?
Well, what this section is,
or maybe I'm not clearly understanding that.
What this section is speaking to that if they construct anything new, if they are to acquire anything, and we have another franchise agreement that is coming through from another utility provider. And in the case that perhaps you saw Vista acquire that provider's interests or vice versa, they would be subject to
so
that would be subject to
expansion by way
agreement.
of acquisition, not expansion by way of new facility.
And typically when they're constructing new facilities, they are doing a lot of the new facilities underground. That is the preference. Underground comes at a higher cost. Some of the challenges in our area, and particularly I know when we have been working through overhead to underground expansions, is our high water table. Makes underground difficult as well because electricity underground involves the fill up with water. Doesn't mix well either. So, but typically now with new construction, what they're looking at is underground connections, and that's what we see in new subdivisions.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Madam Assistant Clerk, is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this matter?
No, Mr. Mayor.
I actually did have one more comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just looked up to the top of my page. Infrastructure for electric vehicles. I know we had a discussion about this a while back, and since we're doing electric franchise contracts, how does that play into all of this? Or is that a completely separate issue from this type of contract?
That would be separate from this contract, and we have partnered with Avista to some extent with our charging stations that we put in downtown. We partnered with them in identifying provider of that, purchasing out of their stock and coordinating recommendations on what we put in there. I know there's some conversations at the state level, and Avista is involved in those conversations about charging stations, expansion of that network, and specifically talking with them. They're doing a lot of work in that regard in Washington. And so in that portion of their region, but that's in coordination with the state.
Okay, so that's on a higher level. So, okay, thank you. The world's going to be quite different in 25 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, not related to this so much, but since you brought it up, the state legislature 2 years ago preempted municipalities from requiring or regulating infrastructure for EVs. Okay, are we ready? Here we go. I will now read the title of the ordinance as follows. An ordinance granting Avista Corporation, doing business as Avista Utilities, a Washington corporation, its successors and assigns the non-exclusive right, privilege, authority, and franchise to locate, construct, install, own, maintain, repair, replace, extend, operate, and use facilities in, upon, over, under, along, and across the franchise area for purposes of the transmission, control, sale, and distribution of electricity and gas within the city. I would entertain a motion that the ordinance pass its first reading by title only and the summary is approved.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Counselor McAllister,
Yes.
Counselor Spudo,
Yes.
Counselor Rule,
Yes.
Counselor Welker,
Yes.
Counselor Dick.
Yes.
The ordinance has passed its first reading by title only and the summary is approved, and this will be posted and we will finalize approval of this ordinance in December 6th. So with that, I think we're good on the public forum.
Mr. Mayor, we have one city resident who had requested to speak on item 7A. If she wishes to speak in public forum.
Okay.
Teresa Stevens, do you wish to speak during public forum?
I don't know if it's appropriate now. I wanted to ask questions about, well, I can't ask questions. I want to make comments about height of buildings and so.
Go ahead, take the podium. You have 3 minutes.
Well, I have more questions than comments, but I think what I want to say is that we live in this small town, and it's always been a small town where people know each other, and we go to town, we love our downtown district. I think at some point that, of course, I missed, the height limits were raised on the buildings. And I feel that we need to hang on to our quiet downtown feel by keeping those height limits to go with the rest of the town. For instance, the corner at the bridge, or the building that is possibly planned where the Pie Hut is, and all these different buildings that you're saying might be 55 or 65 feet. I just feel it's so out there. I am concerned about the one with 102 units or 106 units on Ontario. That's going to affect all of the traffic in that area. It's already awful. Only a few years ago, you could just get right out onto that highway. Dover Bay made a huge difference on that highway. So I don't know what happened as far as the building's getting taller. I always thought it was 3 stories. And we're talking 55 or 65 feet, which is that 5 or 6 stories? Can't answer. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
depends. Yeah, so we have a number of 65-foot buildings in town in the not to dialogue here, but the classic example is the Sandpoint Financial Center where the bank is, right there on Fifth and Oak.
How
So
tall
that's
is that?
65 feet.
Oh.
Yeah. And
I
is
think
there,
it kind of goes with our feel of things because of all the bricks. It's a brick building and it kind of goes with the downtown area. It seems to fit in okay, but I didn't realize it was that tall.
Yeah.
Anyway.
and that is 3 stories, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so 3 stories could be 65 feet. Okay, I think that needs to be really clear for all of us.
Thank you for those comments.
Mr.
Appreciate
Mayor,
it.
if I may.
Yeah.
This was, you know, just something we discussed at our last meeting, when the downtown design competition was presented to us. And at that time, I did encourage staff and ask council to prioritize the revisitation of the maximum building heights downtown. That, you know, the GGLO Bernardo Wills plan does recommend lowering that height limit. And also it's important to think about the setbacks as well. So the recommendation in the current draft of the downtown design competition is for a 35-foot height with then a 10-foot setback, I believe. So really, if you're walking down First Avenue, you would be looking at 35-foot tall buildings. Now, if you're 4 blocks up, you'll still see the 55-foot height limit. So there's definitely I've heard members of the Planning and Zoning Commission discuss the possibility of maybe even going lower than the 55-foot amendment. But looking at both setbacks and maximum building heights in combination. And again, I agree the bank building in town does kind of have a really nice character to it, despite its bulk and its height. That brings us to the historic design standards that we're considering adopting into our, we do currently have historic design standards, but in my opinion, they're not very robust. So the design competition also recommended more robust historic design standards. And we did discuss 2 weeks ago about prioritizing these potential code amendments in the next, you know, short term, as I described it as phase 0 of implementation. So that would start at planning and zoning. That's where those recommendations come from. And I know we have a few planning and zoning commissioners here. So maybe at your next meeting, you guys can start asking for those things to come forward as well. So again, there is proposal to lower the building heights and looking at those setbacks as well, which I think could preserve some of that historic character downtown. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, Jennifer, can you give us a history how we got to the 65-foot and how that all she gone?
Yeah, I would kick it over to,
Well, I think Shelby may have more historical context, as do I, because Planning Commission was 12 years ago. And I don't know if this, I don't know if we just didn't have a complete height code, or if it had been the 60-foot, but I remember this was like 10 years ago. And I don't know that it was bumped up, because I don't remember the context. I just remember having the discussion about these 60-foot things, and that the actual mill building that's still over at Evans Brothers, I think is right around that 65-foot thing. And I remember all those discussions. And so I don't know if that was the code that had been adopted and was always there because that was the tallest thing in town, which doesn't necessarily make sense. I'd have to go way back and look at the historical context of that, but I don't know that it was necessarily raised. It's just that nothing had been built that tall, if that makes sense. And so we get this sense of, oh, we must have changed something, where I'm not sure that if that's how it happened, but I'm not a very good historian without having to go back and read it. So, I can get you some more of those details. I am willing to go back and read that stuff and figure out exactly how that all came together. Because I remember working on codes and facades and getting away from garage nose homes and having porches and places for people to have more community. So,
yeah, I think that'd be good for the community to understand that. Thank you.
yeah, I'll go back and research that and have something to say at our next meeting.
Perfect.
I'll add a few comments since we're having a dialogue here. So actually, history is richer than that. If we go back far enough, it used to be 7 stories was the building height limit. And then it was reduced. I believe it was reduced down to 55 feet. And then it was in 2005 when the Sandpoint Financial Center was proposed that the building height was increased to 65 feet in the commercial A zone. This was 20 years ago. So that's what it has been ever since. So we've actually it really hasn't changed. It's just been that there's been development happening and people have been building to the standard. So in some cases. And by the way, the granary is much, much taller than 65 feet. It's like 120 feet. So
Oh, okay. Well,
so,
maybe
yeah.
that was the 7
So
stories
we could-
then.
Yeah,
I know there
exactly.
was some-
Exactly. I think that was the standard back in the day. But anyway, that concludes our regular agenda and this meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening. Thanks for coming, everybody.